This is New Zealand, located about 4,000 kilometers south of Australia in the Pacific Ocean, known as the world's second most peaceful country. Many people in India and Pakistan are familiar with New Zealand because of cricket. I got to know New Zealand through players like Brendan McCullum, Ross Taylor. However, New Zealand is renowned globally, especially for its large mountain ranges, beautiful lakes, and high-quality organic food. Due to this organic food, some of you might already be aware that the famous movie Lord of the Rings was also filmed in these stunning plains of New Zealand. The climate in New Zealand is similar to that of the UK. Mild summers, long winters, and plenty of rain. Despite these conditions, New Zealand's population is hardly 7% of that of the UK. Approximately 80% of New Zealand is uninhabited, and no one lives there. 70% of New Zealand's population resides in the north, and half of this population lives in Auckland alone. Despite such great weather, beautiful landscapes, low crime rates, and high living standards, why is 80% of New Zealand unoccupied? Let's explore this question. Truth is, if we look at a world map, you'll notice New Zealand is quite isolated. From Karachi or Mumbai, you'd need to cross the Arabian Sea and Indian Ocean, taking an 18 to 22-hour flight to reach it. So how did humans first arrive on this remote island? Now, there are multiple perspectives. According to New Zealand's official website, the Maori people discovered New Zealand about 1,000 years ago, between 1320 and 1350. The Maori, who inhabited the Pacific Islands, also known as Polynesian Islands, left their homes around the 13th century. They sailed in large canoes and reached New Zealand. This was roughly the same era when Genghis Khan and the Mongols were conquering Eurasia. But the question arises, why did these people leave their original islands for New Zealand? When we researched this question, we found that some articles suggest there's a slight difference in the Maori's own historical records. According to Maori tradition, New Zealand wasn't discovered in the 13th century, but around 750 AD by a Maori named Kupe. He was a fisherman who caught fish for his tribe. However, octopuses began eating his catch, creating a food shortage. To solve this, Kupe and his companions decided to search for a new island with better food sources. In this quest, Kupe set sail in the Pacific Ocean with 20 to 25 men. After a few days of travel, they spotted an island with large mountains. This was New Zealand, an island abundant in seafood, sheep, goats, and fruits uninhabited by humans. It was the perfect place for Kupe and his tribe. Kupe sent some of his companions back to the Polynesian Islands to inform others about New Zealand, and thus the Maori people began settling there. Until the 17th century, the Maori lived peacefully in New Zealand, isolated from the world with no enemies or threats. But this was about to change as Western nations expanded globally. When he tried to land, a bloody fight broke out with the Maori people forced to flee. Then in 1769, British officer James Cook arrived. Searching for this continent, he reached New Zealand. Once again, James's soldiers and Maori people fought fiercely, with many Maori James had to return, but this time he made a detailed map of New Zealand and his journey. Through this map, Europeans began reaching this island in the 18th century. This time, they dealt smartly with the Maori, offering trade and profit. The British began building naval ports there, luring them with opportunities. After 100 years, the British took complete control of New Zealand. In 1840, the British and Maori signed a treaty called the Treaty of Waitangi, after which New Zealand became part of the European and British Empire. Back then, the Maori population was about 200,000, but over the next century, it dropped to just 4,000. There were two main reasons for this. When Europeans arrived, they brought diseases that were common in Europe at the time. The problem was that Maori people hadn't developed immunity to these diseases, so after European immigration, local Maori people started falling ill and dying. Secondly, in the 19th century, New Zealand had become a very Just 5 years after the Treaty of Waitangi, a series of wars over land ownership began between the British and local Maori, lasting 40 years. Many local Maori were killed in these wars, and finally this whole process ended in 1881 when all the major Maori chiefs had been killed and the Maori movement was severely crushed. British also realized that they couldn't progress without including locals in the development process, and that's why right after these wars, the British government began including locals in the electoral process and made a key stakeholder in the project, starting peace and progress in New Zealand. But as we showed at the start of the video, why is so much of New Zealand empty? And why do all people live here in the Northern Island? Actually, this southern region is completely empty because in this entire area, living or building is nearly impossible. In New Zealand's southern part, there are mountain ranges everywhere. The whole area is covered with high mountains, and the land is so uneven that even basic infrastructure like roads is almost impossible to build. The eastern side of the mountains is very dry and infertile, which means irrigation isn't possible. That's why New Zealand's majority population lives here on the Northern Island. To solve this population shortage, the New Zealand government relaxed immigration policies after World War II. Before World War II, non-white people were not allowed to enter New Zealand, and for this reason, New Zealand's population stagnated until 1950. After that, when this restriction ended, people from Asia, especially China, Philippines, and India, began settling. New Zealand's population finally started to boom. Today, almost 27% of New Zealand's population are immigrants or those born outside. Most immigrants live in Auckland and its surrounding areas. This is why Auckland is now one of the world's least affordable cities due to low land supply and high housing demand. To address this, the New Zealand government is offering grants up to $8,000 for people to relocate 100 kilometers away to Waikato, to ease pressure on Auckland's housing market and normalize prices. Interestingly, New Zealand's entire agricultural industry relies on animal product export. The lush green land due to rainfall supports countless sheep, goats, and cattle. New Zealand's population is about 5 million, while estimates suggest there are almost 30 million sheep and goats. That's why New Zealand is the world's largest exporter of mutton and sheep wool. 95% of New Zealand's exports are significant, and in 2019, New Zealand earned $46 billion in revenue. New Zealand is the world's 50th largest economy, and its main source of revenue is agricultural export. Earning $46 billion just from meat exports is incredible and should motivate India, Pakistan, and Bangladesh because all three are primarily agricultural. If you enjoyed today's video, please like it and subscribe to the channel. These are all the sources we consulted for this video.